We're ready and recording, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the open forum of EAG. It's the first one we're running under the new terms of reference. And the idea will be that as much information as we can possibly push into this open forum will be pushed into the open forum. And the idea is that there should be some environmental groups listening online. Sorry, I haven't introduced myself. Sorry, do apologise. My name is Adrian Abbs and I'm the chairman of the EAG, which stands for Environmental Advisory Group. I'm joined this evening by several members, Councillor Martha Vickers, Councillor Caroline Culver, Councillor Stuart Gawley. Who else have we got up there? Caroline, Councillor Paul Kander, Councillor Jeff Mays, Councillor Richard Sumner, and Councillor Dennis Bennyworth, I think, returned. There he is. Right, thank you. As I was saying, I am supported this evening by several officers. John Winstanley, who's the Service Director for Environment, who I believe is online. Kofi, who's the Service Lead for Climate Change, who's sitting to my left here. Jenny Graham is still with us or not? I don't see her. No, okay, thank you. No. And Jack Karimi is our Zoom host this evening. And clerking the meeting for that matter. So the idea of EAG, we've changed it to an open forum. The idea is that environmental groups will be able to listen. So that's what they'll be doing. We're recording it. And then assuming we don't say anything we shouldn't say in terms of revealing private information, that recording will then be made public on YouTube, so that any member of the public can see see our deliberations. Once we get running, I am expecting the various environmental groups, once they understand the terms of reference, they understand what we can and can't do as a council, that I'm really hoping they start to bring ideas to the table, both tactical and strategic. But that will evolve over the next few months. This evening, we've got for me, a very interesting agenda. But we're going to start with an update. I believe I'm going to go. Yep, I'm going to go with declarations of interest. Do we have any from anybody here this evening? I know we did it in part one, but part two rather. Anybody want to declare anything for part one? Anybody own shares in any of the companies presenting this evening or anything like that? No. Okay. Right. So, is there a hand up? Right. Well, I can't quite make out the lady's name from here, but I know you're. So,
yeah, I just wanted to confirm if now it's okay that I stay in the conference or if I should come later.
If you don't mind being quiet until we get to your item, I have no issue with you listening at all, really. Because I say this is meant to be an open session, so.
Okay, it's fine. Then I'll stay just to be clear, to stay attend.
Fantastic. Okay, so first item on our agenda this evening is that we're doing or started work on the update to the existing climate emergency declaration to include ecological emergency. And I'd like Kofi to give us an update on where we are with that, please. The reason it's in order for Caroline Culver is that your motion is, well, I think you'll see quite a lot of what you put in the motion is covered by the work that had begun there. So hopefully, but there again, we should be on a shorter path with that to getting it to council rather than having to go to executive and so on and so forth. So over to you, Kofi.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished guests, Chair, honorable councillors, my name is Kofi Adijemfi. I'm the Service Lead for Climate Change for West Berkshire Council. For this particular item, we are proposing to update the earlier climate emergency declaration, which was done by full council in 2019, and which has set us on this excellent journey to be better stewards of our environment. What are we proposing today? The internal attendees can refer to pages 1 to 5 of the supplementary information on the agenda. if you understand our guest, our apologies. We did not want to bore you with council information, so you won't have it on your agenda if you are looking to it. It's a fairly detailed document, so I do not aim to read everything, but I'll just summarize what it is about and finish off by stating what we want the updated declaration to be. So what are we proposing? We are proposing strengthening our current climate emergency declaration to reflect the need to protect and enhance West Berkshire's natural environment, wildlife, and biodiversity. We would propose doing this by updating our existing climate emergency declaration to a climate and ecological emergency declaration. The ecological and climate emergencies are closely linked, and to solve one, we must also solve the other. Our environment strategy and delivery plan have therefore already taken steps to protect the district's natural environment. Updating the declaration to specifically mention the ecological emergency will reinforce the council's commitment and raise awareness of the importance of protecting all aspects of the natural environment. Skipping on to page number, bear with me, 3, please. So this is where we summarize how we intend to update the current emergency declaration. So starting from—
Do you mind if I just pause you there just for a second? Can I just check if members received the draft wording at all? Okay, I've got some nodding. Okay, I was just slightly worried that everybody who has slightly blank expressions on our faces, but hopefully we've all read it before Kofi's presentation. So back to you, Kofi. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in the box here, in the box here goes. The council notes that 1, all levels of government, into brackets, national, regional, and local, close brackets, have a responsibility to limit the negative impacts of climate breakdown. It is important for the residents of West Berkshire and the UK that we commit to working towards net zero as quickly as possible. 2, the consequences of global temperature rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius are so severe that preventing this from happening must be of utmost urgency. 3, the current rate of habitat degradation and loss of biodiversity within West Berkshire and the UK is likely to have a detrimental impact and needs to be prevented. 4, bold climate and ecological action can deliver social and economic benefits in terms of new jobs, economic savings, and improved health and well-being, but also will require changes in individuals' lifestyles and have a cost implication to both the individual and the state. West Berkshire Council, therefore, declares a climate and ecological emergency. Will take action to reduce emissions from operations and activities in order to achieve net zero by 2030. We'll continue to revise and deliver on our strategic plan for West Berkshire that aims to facilitate and influence the achievement of net zero for the district as soon as possible. We'll ensure the ecological emergencies highlighted alongside our climate action to maximize benefits. Calls on His Majesty's government to provide the council with the powers and resources to make the achievement of our climate and ecological targets possible. And finally, we'll work with other authorities and external stakeholders to determine and implement, where practicable, to the best practice methods to contribute to limiting global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius and protecting the natural environment within West Berkshire and beyond. Thank you, Chair. That's a quick summary of the main aspects.
Thanks. There's just one thing I would, in what we said there, you word use possible. I'd like to see the word practicable there myself. But really, this is for me to get the input from the rest of the members. Because I say this is been a piece of work in progress for a few weeks now already. So what are your thoughts, please, ladies, gentlemen? Caroline.
Thank you, Chairman. Are we proposing that this will go to full council or executive? Because
Full
it's
council.
full council. Okay, thank you very much. I know we're discussing my motion later on as well, where one of the actions was to work with the community. And I notice I welcome the fact that you've said proposed ecological emergency actions include a lot of things that are in the motion, but working with the community isn't in there. So at some point, if we can, you know, meld the two together, that would be very welcome. Thank you.
Oh, anybody else? What's the general feeling? Oh, is this good or bad? Indifferent?
Yeah,
Martha.
but very positive. And yes, as you say further on in the paper, lots of councils have already done this and did it some years ago. So it's very timely that we should be doing this also, and the two run alongside each other. And we'll be discussing this further with Caroline's motion, I can see, but I just think it's extremely important, and I'm sure we'll get cooperation from our partners because they can see the importance of it also. So particularly in planning and everything else that goes on in council, the council has control over. So we can do a lot here. You know, we have a lot of power, and I think it's great that we're going to be using that power to work with our partners.
Certainly be trying. Thank you very much, Councillor Vickers. Is anybody online? Any comments at all? Okay, well, oh, thank you,
Beg your
Councillor.
pardon, yeah. I mean, obviously, the declaration we made in May 2019 was to be carbon neutral as a district as well as a council. So the wording might look as if we're rowing back on that. So I think when the point in time comes, we need to be very clear with the public why we think it is that we're not able to reach that target across the whole district. And we obviously know that one of the reasons for that is government inaction, and the fact that government have actually gone backwards today by declaring more licenses for oil. So I think we need to acknowledge that we can't do everything because we're hamstrung by people who are in higher power than us, and work that into our narrative so that the public understands, you know, this is not necessarily a step back from our climate emergency declaration of 4 years ago, but it's to clarify that we cannot do everything on our own. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Kofi.
I think it's also a realistic reflection of you know, what we've managed to achieve, what the public has engaged with over the last few years. You know, as much as I would love to wave a magic wand and have everybody suddenly switch to clean and green energy, et cetera, we can't force people to do that. But we are saying time and time again, for the district to reach its net zero target, the customers, the people in the district need to engage in the process. If they don't, well, the reality is it will be impossible for West Berkshire Council to enforce that. So it's not really a rowing back, but certainly a clarification of what we know we can do rather than what we can't do. Yes, Councillor Vickers.
Well, yes, I'd just like to accentuate and follow up what Councillor Culver said, that because of the government backtracking a bit, it makes our role even more important. That, you know, it makes local councils where the action and the power lies, and hopefully the way they drive things forward will eventually sort of show government and show, with the support I'm sure we'll get, that this is the way to go. That hopefully they are becoming quite populist, but hopefully it'll show that the public are behind us, and that but we need government to follow local council's lead.
Indeed. So, well, if there is any more feedback, if we could set a deadline of a week of Friday to have that back, I think that fits in with the next phase of the document going forward, because it's got some committees and stuff. Sorry if I missed someone. Oh, sorry. Councillor Sumner. Sorry, didn't see you there.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just mindful of the fact, and I don't totally disagree with the sentiments and the concern about the news today, but we also need to be considerate of the cost of living crisis that we find ourselves under, and that means that people need to approach things that they're doing differently. It would be irresponsible of us to blindly go forward and create a situation where people can't afford to do the things that we want to do, and we need to be mindful of that. Which is why, and I totally agree with your your wording of practicable as opposed to possible, because the two things are not the same. We do need to be mindful that not everybody in our district, we do have a reasonably wealthy district, but we do also have areas within it of high deprivation, and we need to be mindful of that. I just wanted to make that point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sumner. Okay, well, we've got the deadline. Anything else that you have, please feed back to myself and officers, and then it'll go forward on to eventually arrive at council in a few weeks' time. So thank you. Moving on to item 2 on the agenda, a timely motion came in from Councillor Culver, who sits here, and that is now up for discussion. I said, well, I think I said at the council meeting that it was fortuitous we had an EAG coming up shortly. So here it is on the agenda. I'm pretty sure it's the fastest we've ever got a motion on to a committee meeting. But anyway, so who's going to lead on this item? Over to Councillor Culver, I think. So
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. I won't read the speech out again that I read at full council a couple of weeks ago.
thank you very much.
But no, I do welcome, Chairman, the fact that you've brought this forward so quickly. Under the previous administration, we had to wait many months, sometimes up to 18 months for things like this to come to an advisory group. So this is very welcome. I think a lot of what you've said in the previous item has been covered, but I would urge you to also include the bullet point 3 under this council resolves about including residents and campaign groups and ensuring that they're included as well, because as we've said, residents can do so much and we need them to be involved. I think there's a lot of welcome things the council has done, like supporting No Mow May and reducing the amount of verge cutting and planting wildflowers and trees and so on. And that is to be welcomed. And it's very much about the partnership that's needed between the residents, the various interest groups, the council and so on and so forth. And just to also emphasise the fact that we have lost our ecologists recently. And I made the point at full council when I proposed this motion that I think it's essential that we try to replace them as soon as possible. I know that this council has challenges with recruitment because we are up against bigger councils that pay more money, but we also need to have an ecologist. We haven't got one at the moment. We've got a contractor who works on nutrient neutrality, but we do need somebody to look at our planning applications and also to be involved with the Windsor and Maidenhead project to create a local network.
Thank you, Sir Councillor Culver. Given the timings of the work that had been already going on and your motion, what is your suggestion to us in terms of what we do with the motion now?
I think if we could include bullet point 3 under council resolves or words to that effect about working with the local community, that would be welcome. And then regarding the recruitment of a new ecologist, I mean, you wouldn't want to put that into the declaration because that's a much longer term thing. But perhaps if we could get some sort of update back to the next EAG about what's happening with that, I think that would be useful so that it's not lost.
Yeah, it's difficult to say too much in an open meeting about recruitment and so on. So we'll skirt around that one on for now. But I guess you have my personal assurance that having an ecology officer is something I would like to see within the council. So let's hope it's practicable, if that's the right word. Okay,
Great, thank you.
On that basis, thank you very much. Has anybody else got any feedback on the motion that they would like to present at this point? Okay, well, is that yourself, Mr. Councillor Mays? Or is that you just?
No, I didn't do anything.
Oh, no, you're off speaker, and I saw you like.
Okay.
No, it's okay. Please stay off if you want. But okay, so on that basis, thank you very much for the input. I think that will then go next its next point of call, in which case they will make a decision about what we're doing with the motion. Exactly. Okay. So, right, I see we have next on the agenda the new waste strategy development. Now, several parties are here. Is it Daniel that's going to take this one? Or yourself?
Peter Jones from
Peter
Eunolia.
Jones. So apologise. So wherever Peter is, over to Peter.
Yes.
Hello. I'm hoping that I might be able to share my screen if that can be enabled.
Just one moment.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I know that time is precious, so I will start talking without you being able to
Do you
see
want
slides.
to introduce yourself first?
I've temporarily
Sure.
made you a drive so you can share screen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So there we go. So with any of that, you should now be able to see a screen.
Not yet. Yes.
There we go. So my name is Peter Jones. I'm a managing consultant at Eunomia Research and Consulting, which is the organisation that has been commissioned by the council to prepare a new waste strategy, which will help to shape the waste services that it offers to residents. As part of that project, we're looking at different ways that waste could be collected within West Berkshire, alternatives to the current collection system. And we do that using some mathematical models that have been developed and used with many other local authorities. Because of the PFI contract, there are some limits to the changes that can be made at this point in time, although there are ideas that can be kept for the future. So our focus is on different vehicles, different collection frequencies, rather than different streaming of materials into different mixes than is currently the case. So another reason for looking to do a waste strategy at this point in time, apart
So
from...
sorry to interrupt, because obviously most people, some members should know what the PFI contract is, but members of the public are unlikely. Could you quickly summarise?
Certainly. The council has an arrangement in place with an external contractor under which that contractor provides both collection services, so trucks and crews and managing those arrangements, and the waste treatment, so sorting of waste and arranging for its disposal and onward sale. And that contract is quite long term. There was a scheme in place, the Private Finance Initiative, under which the council received some support in order to implement that. But the fact that it has time left to run upon it, and there are facilities that have been built under it, means that the opportunities to change things within the scope of that contract are less great than might be the case otherwise. It doesn't really, I don't think there are any particular difficulties about that, but it does sort of limit the range of things that can be done at this moment in time.
And that's within a roughly 10-year span, correct, from here till?
From here, yes. Yeah, overall it's 25 years, I think, in total, but yes, about another 10 years or so left to run upon it.
Okay, thank you.
One of the reasons, apart from the fact that this is the previous waste strategy has come to its end, there have been some pretty significant policy announcements from central government affecting the way that local authorities are going to be required to provide services that affect the materials that might appear on the scene and how services are funded. I'm not going to go into these, but I just wanted to highlight that there are these important new rules, and one of the most significant ones is the introduction of this requirement for consistent collections or greater consistency of collection across England. And so that's one of the considerations we have brought into play in thinking about how the council might design its services in the future. In addition, there is intended to be a deposit return scheme for beverage containers, which is supposed to come into place. So that's plastic bottles and metal drinks cans in the future would be taken out of the council collection system and instead collected at shops and other places through either machines or over the counter, so that that's intended to bring about a much higher collection rate. But that does mean that some materials the council currently collects, it won't have to in the future, which changes things. While these have all been announced, the timings are all a little bit up in the air at the moment. The EPR proposals have now been delayed from 2024 to 2025, so there are, and we're still waiting to hear whether others of these arrangements might also be pushed back. For those who aren't familiar with it, the current service provided differs very slightly between flats and what we talk about as curbside properties, those that have sort of their own individual bins rather than shared bins. At the moment, if you're in a property that has its own individual bins, then you would have a fortnightly residual waste service, fortnightly dry recycling divided into 3 streams of material, so paper and card, glass, and plastic and cans. You would have weekly food waste collections and a fortnightly chargeable garden service. Similar for the flats, but since they don't have gardens in quite the same way, they don't have the garden waste service. You can also have textiles collected, so that's the starting point. Those services rely on a fairly specialized vehicle which collects 3 different types of recycling on the same round. So it has glass that goes into a compartment up at the front, and then the plastic and cans and the paper and card go into 2 compartments at the back. Now, part of the change that we might see with the deposit scheme is that that plastic and cans part of the vehicle might be a little bit emptier because there will be less plastic and cans arising in the future. So, but that's the current shape of the vehicles that's used. And one of the questions is whether those might be the right vehicles. And you can see that vehicle in operation with the glass pod being filled at the front, and the 2 different receptacles, 2 different containers for the plastic and cans and the paper and card at the back. We discussed with the council a range of different options that they might want to consider to make sure that they were operating in the most cost-effective, most environmentally effective, and most efficient manner that they could, learning from practices that have been adopted elsewhere, and to explore all the options that can help to drive up recycling. So some of those have been about thinking about the different vehicles that could be used. So that multi-compartment vehicle we call a single pass vehicle because it collects everything on the same pass. So we've looked at, in option 1, what the effects of changes we already know are happening would be on the current service. So all the changes that come from the new policies from central government and things that the council have already agreed that it wanted to do are sort of built into this initial baseline. We then look at some changes to other things, so different vehicles. We have looked at a simplified vehicle set and a special kind of vehicle called an RRV, and I'll show you what one of those looks like in a moment. We've looked at what would happen if the garden waste were moved onto a free service, because that's one of the changes that the government has suggested it might make. And we have also looked at what would happen if the council did what quite a few councils across England and especially in Wales and Scotland have done, which is to collect the black bin, the residual waste, less frequently than it does at the moment. And the reason for looking at that is that those less frequent collections are the thing that has proved the most successful in increasing the amount of recycling that people do all across the country. So some of our leading local authorities on recycling rate have lower frequency collections than the fortnightly ones that are currently in place in West Berkshire. So those are the sorts of things we've looked at. No decisions have been made at this point, but just wanted to introduce you to the things we've been considering and how we go about it. So I mentioned RRVs, that's a specialist vehicle that has lots of different compartments on it. So you're able not just to separate 3 different streams of material, but you can keep your paper and your card separate, and your and you can collect additional materials on that vehicle at the same time, including the food waste. So we wanted to look at whether that might operate more efficiently. We also looked at whether some simpler vehicles might work. So ones that only collect 2 materials at the same time, combined with a special one just to do the glass, whether that might be a more effective way of running things. So just to introduce you to what those different vehicles look like. And again, these are commonly used around the country. The ones in West Berkshire are a bit more uncommon in their use. So to get to this enhanced baseline, the change that we know is going to be coming through, well, what does that do to materials that are collected for recycling? Well, the effect of introducing the deposit scheme and changing adding some additional plastics into the collections in West Berkshire would increase the recycling rate. It would take it up from about 48.6% up to about 50.2% based on those materials switching around. And you can see that as a reduction in the amount of residual waste, the black bin waste, down by about 16 kilos per household per year, and an increase in the dry recycling. That just ticks up a little bit. So the main effect here is that it's taking material out from the residual waste overall, and that's boosting up the recycling rate. And those, then what we do is look at what happens in each of the different options. How do they compare with each other as far as the flow of waste is concerned? The amount of waste only changes when you do something that causes people to behave differently. So all these options where the vehicles change but nothing else about the service changes, they're all the same as the enhanced baseline. What drives up recycling performance, and you can see these lines going up here in options 4 and 5, they have the effect of bringing about a significant hike in the recycling rate. So we see the overall household recycling rate going up from the current 49.2%. Now this number includes the effect of household waste recycling centres, not just curbside collections. It pushes the recycling rate up up to 57% and up to over 60% if one went to 4 weekly collections. So that's in our view the most likely driver of increased recycling performance. And you can also see that the garden waste service going free of charge also has a positive impact on recycling rates, although it would be something that would be an additional cost to be borne by the authority. So this is looking at what the effects would be on the flow of waste through the system. As I mentioned, we've looked at lots of different vehicles. I'm not going to go into this in lots of detail, but the results show that compared with the baseline, the different options we have explored as far as changing the vehicles around would require more vehicles, but some of those vehicles would be cheaper. And there may be some options that we could build upon, which would help to reduce the total number of vehicles that are required, particularly in option 3. So we'll be doing a bit more work on this to look at what the total costs are to the council flowing out from these different options. You can see that as a result of going to 3 weekly or 4 weekly collections, you're able to reduce the amount of residual waste vehicles that are required, and that means that you end up with a saving on vehicles, so fewer trucks having to drive around collecting that black bin waste. The garden waste service going free does require a couple of extra vehicles as well. As part of our process, we look at the carbon emissions that come from the service. So this is our baseline position. Now, recycling helps to reduce the amount of total carbon emissions the service is responsible for, because it prevents new materials having to be made. It's more environmentally friendly to reprocess the materials than it is to use fresh ones. And so you tend to get a benefit from that. Unfortunately, moving from the current situation to the enhanced baseline, you lose some metal because that's going into the deposit return scheme instead of the household scheme. And so that means that you get a slightly worse environmental position just for the council service than you have at the moment.
Can I just interrupt there for a moment? I just want to be clear. This is not, and this is something I think it's not that the overall number has gone down. It's just the bit that's assigned to us has gone down.
Exactly. So we're only looking at the council service. West Berkshire as a whole would be better off because all in all, more plastic bottles and more metal cans would be captured for recycling. It's just they're not going through the council system anymore. So we're at the limit of what we're looking at is what the council does and what it's responsible for. So this is not a district-wide analysis. So it doesn't look at business waste, for example, which isn't generally collected by the council. This is just an examination of what the council does. And unfortunately, you lose out on some of that useful metal.
Sorry, can I just ask a supplemental to that, which is, what's the evidence behind actually the same amount or more amount of metal, etc., being collected via these different channels?
So the evidence that deposit return schemes are more effective comes from numerous case studies of how these schemes operate in practice across Europe and the US and the other places where they're implemented. Generally, you get back over 90% of the cans and bottles that are available to be captured, and that is considerably better than most local authorities manage within their curbside collection systems at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So when we then look at the carbon impacts of the different options that we've explored, you'll see that as with the vehicle numbers and the recycling rate, it's the move to the 3 weekly collections or the 4 weekly collections that is the big driver of a reduction in the emissions that the council would be responsible for. All the other options, I mean, it's a very small change. You're talking about a couple of 100 or so tons a year at most of carbon emissions. You're potentially saving 1,000 to 2,000 tons of emissions by moving in the direction of the higher recycling rates that come from 3 to 4 weekly collections. So that gives you an update on what we've been doing so far. We're in the process of completing the modelling work, which will look at the financial and the qualitative implications of of these different options, as well as the environmental and waste impacts that they have. We'll be writing up our results as part of the waste strategy, which will incorporate a preferred option that the council will select based on the analysis that we've carried out. There'll be further opportunities for members to take a look at the strategy, and then there'll be a much wider public consultation in the latter part of this year, which will give the public the opportunity to give their view on the options that the council's considered and what it proposes to do next. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. If you have questions or comments, please do let me know. But I think I shall stop sharing my screen so that we can all see one another.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. I think the initial comment I'd like to make, this is very much an analysis of options at the moment.
Yes.
Absolutely no decision has been made in any direction at this time. So please, nobody, when this is broadcast, suddenly think all decisions we've made. This is a genuine inquiry about how we affect recycling rates within West Berkshire and how do we actually get to a higher number. There are limited ways that we can do it from what's just been presented. So I'd really like to get other members' feedback on this. What are your thoughts? There were some couple of controversial ones there mentioned, going to 3 and 4 week collection. The public at the end of the day will have their thoughts on this. What are our thoughts in terms of those quite hard to swallow options? Martha, do you want to go first?
Right, yes, I was just trying to follow the tables as they were going through, but I think was that last one, was it saying that if we move to say 3 weekly, if we extend the time as regards collection, then our recycling rates, then we get less waste. Basically, people know their bin is filling up, so therefore they're more careful about what they put. Is this what we were saying?
Indeed, yes. At 3 weekly, we estimate that the authority's recycling rate would move from its current 49% to a 57% recycling rate.
Okay, so that's sort of figures that you're thinking more carefully about what you throw out, but that we continue with the food waste is the important one that needs to be collected weekly, because that's the one that really is not nice to have hanging around.
Absolutely. In all options, the food waste remains collected weekly.
Yeah, and also how we get these ideas out there and how we get public feedback. Obviously, this open forum is excellent. I don't suppose there's proposals to, I mean, I think our lobby is an underused reserve.
Once we've worked up the report's been worked up, there will be a public consultation exercise on this directly anyway. So
Online.
well, the exact details of the consultation, I assume online, and but yeah, because that's the way we do most of them these days. But okay, Councillor, who was next? Stuart, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's good to see the numbers and good to see a range of options available. You know, with some really positive looking numbers. You know, no doubt whatever option is chosen, there's going to be a significant kind of change management process that will need to happen, not only for our contractors, but also for residents. But I think it's good to have the options and good to be able to talk about it openly and share that today. And I hope that people will take the option to look back at this recording and see that and have a chance to really think about it ahead of any public consultation which may come down the line. So thank you for that.
So I'll just add in, before I come to you, Councillor Mays, there is one other element that's going on here. You can delete this afterwards if it's not allowed to be broadcast, but I understand the Veolia, our waste contractor, is in the middle of changing its fleet. So actually coming up with a new strategy at this point is quite serendipitous to achieving or making sure we choose the right vehicles or the right vehicle person. So, you know, yeah, anyway, just keep that in mind as well, members, please, that, you know, there are a few things converging together. Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Peter, I've got 3 things I want to really discuss. I think you said that milk bottles would go back to the source of the milk bottle?
Not
plastic milk bottles.
I'm sorry. For brevity, I didn't give all the details of what's in and out. Unfortunately, milk and milk products are excluded from the scope of the deposit scheme.
Okay, right. So they would still go back into the plastic.
They would, yeah.
Plastic, the green bag for plastic. Yeah. Tins are the same. Steel tins, that's metal. But you haven't mentioned
only drinks containers. So
only drinks.
So
what about food containers?
Not in scope of the scheme.
And what about tin foil, which is aluminium?
That's not in scope of the deposit scheme, but it is something that the council is discussing adding into the collection service. I think that's one of the items that Daniel and Kofi and the team are thinking about and discussing with Veolia.
Yes, and what about plastics which are not in bottle or tin form? You know, films. Are they going into just the black bin? So
pots, tubs, and trays, the ones that are not bottles.
Okay, yes.
You know, things like fruit punnets and that sort of thing. That the council will be looking to add into the collection system, and it looks like there's going to be an obligation to do that by about 2024-25.
Okay.
Plastic.
Well, that's an improvement.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
absolutely. Yes. So that's part of what helps to offset the loss of the plastic bottles, is that there will be an addition of those pots, tubs, trays. The government has said that it wants to see local authorities collecting plastic film by March, April 2027. So that would be the date currently announced for councils to be asked to do that. Exactly how that would happen in West Berkshire, it does require some investment in the sorting facility or a means to separately collect that material. But that is what the government has said it's looking for. Unfortunately, all of these government announcements seem a little beset with delay. So I can't commit to you that 2027 is the date that it will be required, or that West Berkshire will do it, but that's what they've currently said.
Yeah, and you're looking at that as well. Good.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bennyworth.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm sure I'm not alone in remembering the fallout of public opinion when we went from weekly to fortnightly collections, and And yeah, I mean, the thought of rolling that out further still would be an interesting one to sell to the public. I get that, but is there any chance of mitigating that with a further rollout of the very popular mini recycling centres that we've had pop up over the last few years? They seem to be wildly popular.
I think I should need to leave that to officers to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Benioff. Yeah, we're always looking out for good locations which are likely to be well supported by the local community to implement more mini recycling centres. Fair to say that our recent installations have been met with mixed success. There have been a couple of locations where they are working fantastically well, but at least one location is beset with misuse, and we are considering withdrawing that if the problems continue. So all that to say, we will still explore implementing it where the local community can work with us to ensure we are getting high quality and high quantity of recyclables. Thank you.
Kofi, thank you very much as ever. Always good to talk to you. I just wondered, I mean, the need for those recycling centres would one would assume would increase if those collections were spread out further still, and it may take a different sort of modelling altogether, possibly.
If I might comment. What the part of what we do in our modelling is to look at the capacity that residents have and the extent to which that's adequate to the likely amount of waste that they would produce. So if you look across the different containers that residents would have, the expectation would be that the waste most households would generate would fit within those sorts of containers. There are indeed some good mitigations that you can do. And so if the council were to head in this direction, there are some suggestions we might make about what it would do alongside that. One thing that some authorities that have moved to 3 or 4 weekly collections have done is to provide services for especially for people with young children or people who have other needs for hygiene products. So that can be operated as a separate service, operating more frequently or filling in between the residual waste collections. Another possibility is that you might look at houses that have unusually large households in them and make special provision for those, which might be a larger container, for example, to make sure that they aren't unduly disadvantaged for having a large household. So there are mitigations you can make that help to prevent some of the problems. I think that a lot of the concerns that arose when authorities were first looking at going from weekly to fortnightly was that those changes were happening when there wasn't a really good solution for what to do with your food waste. And that, after all, is the stuff that goes bad in the bin. You know, I can happily put as much plastic film or you know, whatever other non-recyclable, biodegradable materials I want in my bin and leave it for weeks and weeks, and it won't be in too bad a state. So it really is about encouraging people to move their food waste across, and that is one of the things that reduced collection frequency has been very effective in doing. It's one of the reasons why some of the Welsh authorities that have adopted that approach have considerably higher recycling rates than we tend to see in England.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a huge, from my understanding, my own briefing by officers, 25% of the black bin is still made up of food waste. So if we did nothing else as an authority, if we could persuade that 25% out of the bin, one bin into the other bin that's already collected weekly, we would have immediate jump. And that is something the public can engage with without us doing anything, to be quite frank. I mean, they just simply need to do it. Once the smelly stuff's out the black bin, we can start calling it what it really is. It's residual waste. Residual, meaning that we haven't pre-sorted into plastic or tin or cardboard and so on and so forth. So this comes back to get the heart and minds of the people of West Berkshire. If they choose to use what's there, they're helping everybody all at once. But anyway, we'll see that. Just remember, there aren't any hard choices. Sorry, there aren't any choices that have been made, but there are hard choices to make if we really want to achieve high levels of recycling. And from what I understand from the public that have spoken to me, they do want that. And therefore, we have to show them a way of getting there and that we're thinking about it. Is there anybody else that'd like to add?
Yeah, just add that I did mention briefly that we will do qualitative analysis as well as quantitative, and thinking about the impact things have on residents and the extent to which change is seen as practicable and manageable. That's something that we will look to take into account and give the right amount of weight to, alongside any numerical changes we might see.
Yeah, we tried to think the whole thing through, not just part of the problem. Thank you. Unless anybody else has, oh, sorry, Councillor Sumner, I didn't see your hand up there.
Always last to put my hand up, Chair. Just for clarity, because I think I may have missed it in conversation, the deposit return scheme, the scale of the enterprise that would be required in as far as how many sites would be set up, where they would be set up, but also where the funding for those deposit returns is actually coming from, please.
Yes, so it's paid for by the beverage industry. So the way that it works, when you buy a can or bottle that is within the scope of the scheme, you would pay a certain sum of money on top of the cost of that drink. So say 20p. And you get that back when you return it, but there will always be a percentage of people who don't return it. So there'll be a source of money to run the scheme that's partly from the what they call the unredeemed deposits. The setup costs are met by the beverage industry, and those include making sure that there is provision for the collection points, which would tend to be in shops, but also in a variety of other locations where people are likely to want to take their beverage containers back to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Watch this space, I guess. Unless anybody else, I think we're going to move on to our site, Councillor Kanda.
Sorry, I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Sumner's question as well, which is, do you have a proportion, or is there an understanding based on your research, the proportion of things that are typically included in those arrangements and those things that are not? And then also the percentage of people who would never bother doing it because they can't be bothered to go down to wherever it is to deposit it and get their 20p back.
Yeah. So like I said, the return rate within such schemes is rarely less than 90%, and in some European countries is considerably upward of that into the mid to high 90s. And as far as the range of materials that are covered, all plastic bottles and drinks cans that meet the definition. So there's a certain upper and lower size band. So it's less than 3 litres and more than 50 millilitres, I think, is the range, and defined partly by what's contained within it. So not milk, for example, but or milkshakes, but yes to beer and spirits, and yes to fruit juices and fizzy pops and anything else that might be in a plastic or metal container is going to be covered. So I don't know if I hope that answers your question, Councillor Kanda.
Yes, it does. And just one more then. So is it the plan then that this would be done by lots of local shops and the like, and in which case then how are they incentivized?
Sorry, Councillor Kanda, I do apologise. We're going to run out of time on the agenda. I've just had one signal. by all means, drop me a note on this, and we'll get the experts to come back on the detail. Because I say we could spend all night talking about this one, I think. But
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Will do.
thank you very much indeed. And okay, so moving on, we are going to talk. I've got Councillor Honeyman here with us this evening, and he's going to give us initially some context on some previous microhydro projects that were attempted in West Berkshire by a number of town councils. So over to you, Councillor Honeyman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the efforts to get us some hydroelectric generation on the River Kennet in Newbury started in 2003, principally by myself making presentations to Newbury Town Council. They continued the efforts until 2011. In about 2008, I was then a West Berkshire councillor for the Victoria Ward, which included many of the hydro sites. And I was able to persuade the then administration to commission a feasibility study from IT Power. And we will refer to that shortly in the slides as we go through them. So I'll give you a very brief history of what happened in the past and tell you a bit about the possible sites. And then I will move on, and then we will just mention the figures which that feasibility study brought up. So, as I said, Newbury Town Council started this one. We had some input from TV Energy at the time, and then West Berkshire Council rather took that over when I became a West Berkshire councillor. So the first slide refers to the background. This is rather historic. I shan't read it all out, but it is quite interesting to see that all this was going on at about the turn of the century. Yeah, I always get centuries a bit muddled up now.
Sorry about this. I'm just sharing it at the same time.
Okay.
There we are.
Brilliant.
There you are. Tell me when to switch slide.
And the principal hydro plant was at Greenham Mill. And this provided for street lighting in the town. The figures you're seeing here, 60 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts, and so on, aren't really quite representative of what the river's actually capable of delivering. It was clear, reading the accounts of how these plants were operated, that there was a certain amount of damming up of the water and then using it during the evening and night. Going on, the plant at Greenham Mill was upgraded into using internal combustion engines and generators like that. And it was under the control of the Central Electricity Generating Board and was used up until 1969, which is rather surprising. But it all became hopelessly uneconomic with the growth of the grid and everything else, so it was all closed. The site was subsequently sold to a pipeline welding firm who thought they could make use of the cheap electricity, but in reality, they didn't actually do that. And the turbines which were there, still there, though unused for some years, were scrapped. And the site went over to a flatted development. And interestingly, an Environment Agency automated sluice. Elsewhere in Newbury, there was a 70 kilowatt turbine installed at Town Mills, and that was demolished and replaced with housing in the 70s. So we move on. I've prepared a map, that'll be the next slide, but there are three principal sites in Newbury. There are others as well, actually, but the first one would be Town Mills, Dalton Mews in the west. The central site is Victoria Sluices, adjacent to the A339 river crossing, and Greenham Mill in the east, which is where the old power station actually was. The next slide does show the three sites very schematically. The sites at Town Mills and Dalton Mews are in private ownership, with the exception of part of Lock Island, which is owned by the Town Council. Victoria Sluices site, as far as I can find out, is owned by West Berkshire Council and possibly British Waterways or their successors, and the Greenham Mill site is privately owned. The Victoria Sluices site is interesting because it is adjacent to the library and the West Berkshire Museum, both of which could be a good source of using any electricity which is generated. All the sites are complicated by the division of flow throughout the various arms of the river and canal, and they all have about the same head, and they're all rather low heads, in fact, by most people's standards. We then move on to the more defining document. This was paid for by West Berkshire Council in 2008, and it was the IT Power Feasibility Study. And I will just move on to the final slide, or nearly final. Figures taken from that study gave these various flow rates, all a little bit technical, but the important ones is something like 5 cubic meters per second is the average flow rate. The gross head is 1.5 meters, and that will apply for most of those sites. The IT Power Feasibility Study was dealing with Archimedean screws, as indeed did many of the other people we approached. And it was reckoned it would generate something like 22 kilowatts on average, but then I refer you back to the flow figures. You can see 10% of the time the flow is up to 10 cubic meters per second. So there would be a variation. And this is maybe a little bit of an underestimate, in fact, because it's only 2.5 meters cubed going through the actual turbine. So at the end of the day, this will produce something like 126,000 kilowatt hours per year. There's a value which can be put on that, which is what used to be called a feed-in tariff. It's the modern equivalent. It's an SEG, and I hate to say it, but I've forgotten what that actually stands for. But it's the value of the electricity you would feed back into the grid and what you get paid for, and that will earn £15,000 a year. I think if you do the sums, you end up with a payback time of around 13 years. Now, I feel these figures are quite pessimistic, but then it's right that they should be, because we're talking about spending possibly public money or whatever. So this is just really to give members an indication of where we were before. I'm afraid I didn't take the matter very much further after 2011. There didn't seem to be the political appetite of the then administration to look into it further. And I became very busy with my ward duties in Victoria Ward in Newbury until 2015. Finally, there's just a couple of pictures. There's a picture of the Victoria Sluice site, which is on your screen. And more promisingly, I feel in some ways, except it isn't near the use of electricity, which would be the best. There's the Greenham Mills site, which is where the power station used to be. And I think, Chair, I think that's my presentation.
Thank you very much.
Very happy to take any questions.
And that's exactly what we're going to right now. And before we move on to the next part, which is looking at, I guess, the modern equivalent or potential modern equivalent of the work.
Come in.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Councillor May, could you mute him, please? Sorry. Is there any questions of Councillor Honeyman in terms of the history of microhydro? And we focused that, you focused on Newbury at the time.
Well, yes, that's the other point. These parameters actually prevail throughout the Kennet Valley. They get better as you get a bit more towards Reading, because clearly more tributaries are joined in, and so there's a bigger flow. But probably every few miles, every 2 or 3 miles, there is the capability of generating between 20 and 40 kilowatts. And that amounts over the whole Kennet Valley through the area of West Berkshire to an appreciable power output. So I would like to think that ultimately this will be sorted out in such a way that we can use some modular construction, which would be put into place with cooperation with the actual riparian rights owners and other individuals throughout the Kennet Valley. That would be a very good way of cutting the district's carbon footprint.
Thank you. Yeah, personally myself, when I've looked at the maps of the area, very approximately, it's about 100-meter fall from one end of West Berkshire to the other. So yeah, there's a reasonable amount to potentially work with there, but let's see if it actually makes any sense to do this before we start the hairs running. So next up, thank you. Unless anybody else has any particular questions for Councillor Honeyman. No? No, okay. Thank you very much for that. Very interesting. Next up, I want to bring that really into to look at in a modern context. So officers have made contact with Turbulent. I believe you're based in Belgium. I could be wrong. No, well, I'm right. So that's all right then. And I think you're going to talk to us a little bit, some sites, pilot sites or potential pilot sites, locations have been shared with you. And I believe you're going to talk to us a little bit about your technology and how that might apply in a few of these pilot locations that have been indicated. So really over to you. I'm not sure who's presenting though. Yes. Okay, over to you then.
Yes, hello, and thank you for allowing me to present today. I'm trying to share my screen, but I need permission.
You can now.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, no problem.
Sorry. Okay, so indeed, I'm representing Turbulent. We are a Belgium company. We are already in the market since 1916, and we our expertise is in decentralized hydropower. So basically, our innovation is inspired in on taping the potential hydropower, the hydropower possibilities that are coming from very low head sources, as normally they are very close to cities, business towns, farms. So what you see in the image here is on the left is kind of the typical projects of hydropower where there is only one source of generation, and it's normally having some consequences and impact in the surrounding, and on the right hand side is how we see the possibilities with distributed hydropower. So we use the river, but we can generate in several parts of the river. So at the end, we look forward to producing the similar amount of energy, and our impact regarding concrete use will be minimal. So how we do this? We work with a gravitational vortex that implies a generator combined with a specific shape of a basin that will guide the water flow to hit the blades in an efficient way. So with this, we want to generate energy, and we have four main characteristics: is the high return of investment of this solution. This has been designed for very low maintenance that I will show at the end of the presentation. It has also been designed for fish friendliness, so the fish can pass through the blades due to the low RPMs. And this is happening because we don't pressurize water. So the fish will not suffer also differences in pressure from the moment it enters to the moment it leaves the turbine. And as you can see here, and I will also show some comparison with classical hydropower, is the easiness of our civil works. So at the end, we can provide a solution that can generate 24 hours, 7 days a week, and is inspired, and it is actually possible to work in a modular way and scale up, depending not only in the power needs, but also in the availability of sites. And what I show you here is on the left, the type of sites. Actually, those are irrigation canals that are very often passing through cities. And on the right, you have also weirs or installation as the one actually that were shared with us and that were introduced in the previous presentation. So we like to think in a different way where the centralized power can be generated using no dams, which is minimizing the type of impact that we have. Is a solution that is designed since its beginning for fish mobility, and the optimal way to work is in cluster of sites that can be installed along the river and being synchronized thanks to Internet of Things. What do we need? Well, the suitable places for us is either a drop distributed or a sudden drop, where we can build a canal and take the water that we need for the turbine, send it back to the river, and from there and from our submergible generator, we have a cable that goes to our electrical and control cabinets. Yeah, I converted the measurements to feet, but I saw in the data just shared that is also used with metric system. So this is basically how we will. So there's two components, actually three, if I take, of course, into account the canal. If this drop is sudden, we just need the inlet, no canal is needed. But basically those are the components we need compared to classical small hydropower, where we will not need many of the components that you need. For example, for the debris trap, we don't need, as debris can pass through the turbine. How does it look in reality? Well, here you have from left to right, just the core unit, then the impeller, the electronics, and on the right is how it looks ready to ship. And to have a comparison in human scale, you see here some of our installations, and you can have a perspective. For example, on the left, you see that's a 15 kilowatt turbine in a 1.5 diameter basin. So where are we compared to distributed energy sources? Well, I'm not even going to talk about diesel because I don't think it's your case. But when you compare us with solar and batteries, we have a competitive LCOE. Of course, this is finally defined once we know what will be the cost of civil works in each country. As I mentioned before, our payback time can be between 4 to 8 years. Nowadays, with the prices of energy, we have cases in which even 3 years it's enough to have a payback. And our plan factor, of course, when you have hydro, and depending how we design, but we can have water available 90% of the time, which means we can produce almost constantly, with exceptions of the maintenance time. Normally for solar and batteries, the plan factor is around 20%, 22 in a good case. Talking about impact, so the type of surface we need to generate the same as what is needed for a solar installation of the size of a football field is one of our turbines of 70 kilowatt, which basin will take 5-meter diameter surface, just to give you a little bit some comparisons. So what can we generate from our smallest turbine, which is 15 kilowatt? We can go from 100 megawatt hours per year up to 600 megawatt hours per year with our biggest model of 70 kilowatt. The number of homes that you see here in Europe is taken into account baseload. Of course, nowadays with all the electrical vehicles and the new heating systems. The peak values are different, but this is regarding base load, what we can provide. Our electrical cabinets are basically low voltage panels that will, the output is already AC and is three-phased. So normally if we are less than 1 kilometer to the connection point, we will need no transformer. Where are we in the world? Well, we currently have 19 turbines in different stages. And one of our projects, which is actually running, is in the UK. So the environmental agency has decided to evaluate our technology, and we have one of our turbines installed in the Denver Sluice Gate complex. The testing is currently going on, and we normally should have the final results in December this year. Our maintenance will be, as I mentioned before, quite simple. So after a number of hours running, an initial inspection is needed. It is designed to have every year type of a car maintenance in which oil needs to be changed, general observation of the system, especially the all the system to avoid that water is going in the gearbox, any noise that is perceived. For the electrical cabinet check is foreseen every 2 years, and every 3 years there will be a big maintenance where it's a combination of the small together with the sealing replacement and the bearing lubrication. We take into account 15 to 20 years to have a change in the genset and give a new life to the whole turbine. So indeed, talking about your council, 4 sites were shared with us, and we actually concentrated only in giving a general analysis for Greenham Mill. We found the flow direction curve, which is the minimum input that we need to have an idea of the flow that is available. And we found that actually, let's say 80% of the time you have a flow of about 2 cubic meters per second, which could allow us to work with a 30 kilowatt turbine. However, what we see is that the gauge is installed where you see the red dot. The flow is running from left to right, and the site analyzed is in one of the bifurcations. So it means that we really don't know exactly what the flow is there. I'm glad to hear of the previous presentation that there are some flow measurements, but of course, for us, using public information, we could only find the flow in this place. So further analysis is needed to really fine-tune our calculation. This is how the site looks. And by measuring using Google Maps, we measure a distance here of about 3 meters. Of course, this needs to be fine-tuned and discuss further. But what we did, assuming a flow of 2.5 cubic meters per second and a head of 2.1 meter, which is what we could estimate, and taking into account 75% of available flow, we estimate a possibility of generating 198 megawatt hours per year of clean energy using our 30 kilowatt turbine. So indeed, talking about distributed decentralized energy, we see 4 places with potential to install. What I observed in the very first place on the left, close to the, I think it was the library, if I'm not mistaken, the flow there looks more for only a 15 kilowatt, but this is all to be analyzed in our engineering study, where we will not only do all the flow analysis and dimensioning of the maximum capacity, we will also work in civil works proposals and integration to your energy system. So for the moment, this is what I can share and give time for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. I can see Roger's ready to go, so off you go, Roger.
Yes, Chair, am I permitted to ask questions?
In this case, absolutely, yes.
Oh, thank you very much. How does your device compare with the Archimedean screw in terms of capital cost and civil engineering?
Well, an Archimedes screw is also part of the classical technologies. It's also fish friendly. It's a massive structure that needs full logistics to transport. So these are units of several meter length. At the level of cost, I know from previous studies that we are competitive when we compare not only the technology, but also the civil works. But that is something we need to do for the cost in the UK.
Any indication as the cost per kilowatt, if you like?
So normally for the technology, it will range between, let's say, of course, due to economy of scale, some part of the engineering work that we need to do is easily distributed in the 70 kilowatt turbine instead of the 15, but you can count on a range between 4,500 euros per kilowatt to 3,000 euros per kilowatt of technology.
That's the installed cost you're referring to there as an extremely rough estimate, I take it.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure we have others. Caroline.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can I ask what our objective is in this? Do we have a budget, or are we just doing some general thinking to start off with about what's feasible?
General thinking. Roger and I have known each other for quite a while, which is how I knew Roger knew something about what had been attempted previously, and I'd come across Turbulent myself. If anybody interested will know that they are playing a slightly different model than a lot of people out there. From a council perspective, we have a lot of potential energy flowing through West Berkshire. So I'm, as an executive portfolio holder, I'm interested to know whether or not we can do investor safe schemes that would actually work and save money, but save the environment at the same time. So at this point, it's about establishing, and I'm very, very interested myself to hear from Turbulent. I think I know the answer, but would you say that how many locations would you say at a very top level you think are viable from the 4 that we showed you as possibles? How many of those are viable, do you think?
From the 4?
Yes.
The 4.
All 4.
From what I could analyze, yes, of course, a site visit is needed. As you, I don't know if you noticed, I estimated 2 meter head, while the gentleman presenting before mentioned that the head is 1.5. So those are the type of things that we can only accurate do during a site visit or an engineering study, of course.
Indeed. So yeah, I'll come back to, but just trying to answer Caroline's question. So what is this all about? I'd like a steer from other members. I'm quite keen that we do things that, save the environment and money at the same time. So we have a limited ways of doing that as environmentalists. We can use wind, we can use solar, we can use tide, sorry, not around here. We can use geothermal, sorry, not around here. We know nuclear, so sorry, not around here, but we do have, a fair bit of water flow. So I want us to explore as a team what we think about this and, what negatives, if anything, we can think of so that we can then say to officers, we think this is worth taking and doing a proper exploration on it in terms of working up a project plan, which would then have to be approved by executive and so on. But that's where we're at it very, very early on. But I'm quite pleased to see something being presented early on. Martha.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, well, it's great to see Roger here giving his presentation, because I was actually on the council at the time when he was looking into this project many, many, many years ago and I was chairing the committee at the time, which was called Sustainable Newbury, which was sort of like partnering with the town council. And Roger did his best. He had some colleagues, and actually getting together with the colleagues was a nightmare at the time. But also, I think the funding that we had and what was available then, it just all seemed that little bit too difficult. So, I mean, time moves on, and I think it was a really interesting presentation here. And what impresses me is the comparison that our presenter makes between other forms of alternative energy and what you get, basically, you know, for your money. I think I thought it was very impressive, and it would be great if we could get some, I don't know, grants or some input from other agencies to do a sort of experiment, you know.
We'll have officers go see what.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure Roger will be amazingly pleased that the work that he did many years ago might be, you know, trigger something now, you know, that it wasn't all wasted. So thanks very much.
Thanks. Could we just come off presentation mode? I can see a hand up, but I'm damned if I can read the name of the person from this distance. There we go. So I'm going to go top left first, Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, that obviously very interesting topic, very keen for it to be investigated further. Just conscious that that's very Newbury-centric. And of course, we do only briefly, we know, but northeast end of the district, we have got the Thames flowing through. And if you go out to Pangbourne and you sit on a lovely summer's evening outside the Swan, you'll see the water at a fair lick of knots going through at that point through the weir. So I'm just wondering whether there's the potential, or certainly then we need to be mindful of other areas outside of those that have been looked at there. I'm not expecting answers to whether that would be good or bad as to whether anybody's even looked at it previously, but just a point for consideration, Chair. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to answer that one, actually, Richard. This is the reason it's looking at Newbury's, because we had previous data on it and we had an expert from it. That's the only reason. Yeah, if someone was from Hungerwood was saying to me, what about us? Yes, there's probably some potential up there. If everything looks okay here, it's certainly going to look okay in these other locations as well. But we have to start somewhere. So, yeah, this is the start point. Councillor Benworth.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much for your presentation. Very, very interesting. I don't know if we discussed, had a broad idea as to what the cost for this project might be.
I think we had it in thousands of euros per kilowatt per install, didn't we? I remember a 3,000 to, anybody remember the upper number?
4,500.
Thank you very much. There you go. So between 3,000 to 4,500 kilowatt installed.
Civil works are not there. That's something we have to calculate, because for the UK, I need to work that with some local.
It's all right. I've got a look at in Spade at home. I'll give you a hand. It's be all right.
Chairman, if I can, please, just bottom line idea, an idea as to the overall cost of this.
I don't know at this point. It's too early. I wanted feedback from the members of EAG. Is this something we ask officers to investigate properly? My sense is that yes, it is. It's worth spending a bit of time looking at it properly. In which case, we would then get a real number out which would obviously then present it to council and so on and so forth. But at the moment, it's slightly earlier than you have the very finger in the air. We think this makes sense at the moment. We need to go to the next level before we know, yes, it is. And of course, as much as I'm appreciative of Turbulent being here, they are one micro hydro technology. They're not the only ones on the market. I'm sure they would be the first to admit that. So anyway, sorry, I have to apologise. I can't read your name, so over to Turbulent.
It's okay. Maria Elvira is my name. So, yeah, regarding the question about comparing with Archimedes screw, one of our advantages is that our generator is underwater, so we generate no noise, and that can be relevant for some social open spaces. To know how an Archimedes will sound, you can find videos in the internet, and then you can compare by yourself. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you very much for that. Is anybody else? I'm really appreciative of your time and staying so late. It's you're at least an hour ahead of us. So anybody else like to ask any last questions? Caroline?
Yeah, Councillor Honeyman mentioned about one of them being close to the library. Do we have to try and site things near to the buildings that we want to power, or does it not really matter? Would we basically be putting stuff into the grid and earning some money back and then using that for other things?
The reason why it's best to actually use your own energy is it saves you more money. You will always get more money back from replacing grid energy in your local thing like a library than selling it to the grid. It's the difference between probably about 25p a unit at present and 10p.
Maximise the return on the investment by selling to ourselves, as opposed to just going with the minimum export guarantee, which is what the government rate is.
Having said that, when the library is not open, it can be sold to the grid. So you don't waste it, but you obviously get the best return.
Or put in a battery, who knows? Anybody else? Do I see Turbulent wanting to make one last comment?
No, thank you. That was my from my previous.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I'm pretty sure officers will be in touch fairly soon, I hope.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Okay, and I'm really hoping we have more things like that come along to EAG. If any member knows something, knows somewhere that I do not assume I've got all the answers, please bring any ideas to the EAG, talk to myself, Kofi, get it on the agenda. This is the time to be thinking out the box. Okay, so next we're on item 7, pollution monitoring systems. Sorry for keeping you so long. Sorry, could you say your name once for me to make sure I get it right? Yes, you do. Yeah.
So my name is Bijan Mohandes.
Bijan. Okay, Bijan, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. So I've come today to talk to you about Technicom IoT. I'd like to...
Sorry, just to help everybody, can you bring the microphone slightly closer to your mouth? Just slide it across to you.
Sorry.
Lovely. It's really for the people online, so
you should be able to share.
Okay. Okay, I'm just having looked over there because that'll tell me where it's been sharing.
You won't be able to read it on that one, I'm afraid.
It's not loading. I'm going to just stop you sharing and then try again.
I'm sorry?
Try again because it didn't come.
Try again, okay.
It's still loading.
We have a copy of the presentation that we can give to an officer or to someone to.
I can always do that.
And can I make sure that you're okay that your presentation is distributed after the meeting?
Yes, I will just give this to your colleague here.
Thank you. Bear with us,
just-
everybody. If you want to start talking. and then
Yeah,
we'll
I'll just
catch
start
up.
talking and we'll catch up. So Technicom is a company that was founded in 2019 by myself and one other member. We started with a personal investment of around £25,000. In March 21, we received a £25,000 grant from the Newbury West Berkshire Council under the ARG grant system. Very shortly after that, we found a partner who was an angel investor who has invested a further £75,000 into our company. So we decided to manufacture a product called Common Sense, which means that we can have any types of sensors being able to communicate. And we're currently developing something called EnviroSense, and we have another product as well, but I'm here to talk about EnviroSense. So the main problem we're addressing is today. That's right. So I think I'm on page 3 now. So no, one before. Okay, so it's very difficult today to set up a IoT deployment company with a full platform, and making something scalable is very difficult. So Common Sense is kind of a solution for that. Also, we feel that the end users want visualized data. There's no point in sending spreadsheets and so on. Nobody uses them. You want to be able to look at something that has a visual explanation of what it is. Now, and then we also have the ability to integrate with third parties. So if you want to have a sign or connect to something else to do no entry, high pollution, we can do that. We use APIs. Some of you were familiar with that. It's just a protocol to transfer information. So today, the EnviroSense, the typical market today is showing that you have these fixed sensors that are located on poles at fixed locations. And they're rarely in the urban areas where we all walk. And they have very little visual live data that you can go and look at. You can't look up today and go and say, oh, I wonder what it's like over here today in central Newbury. Because in Newbury, there's 2 sensors. There's one on the Burger King roundabout, and there's one on the A4. And I don't very often go to the Burger King roundabout, and I don't very often go to the A4. So they don't give a good indication. The other thing is pollutant gases all interact with each other. NO2, SO2, O3 all have interactions and they modify each other. So there's no point in taking data at one place and saying it's a representative value of the other place. So we've developed a disruptive product that is very small and compact. So I'm showing you an example of this over here. This is about the size of it is. And this can be small enough that it can be mounted on a car or a taxi or a bus.
Okay, Fiend, I'm sorry to ask, but or Jack, would you mind, the camera's over there and I'm pretty sure those online won't see it. Could someone take it somewhere nearer the camera, so or can we focus in on it?
So essentially, it's the size of a large A4, large iPhone, and there's a thicker version of it as well. And this type of device allows you to take measurements that are, we can measure 5,000 measurements a day, 5,000 measurements a day. So if you imagine you've got a taxi or a bus riding around town and it's recording the air everywhere that device goes. The device has GPS tracking and it has LTE, Cat M1 data uploads. So we are able to put all this data onto a map and visualize it. So that's the big key thing. Now, compared to these fixed installations that cost, I've seen some that cost 10,000 and some that cost 50,000. It depends on how elaborate they are and how much things that they add. So EnviroSense, the product we have, if you are on slide 5 now, essentially, this is a complete integrated system end to end, where you can do everything in one single thing. We can integrate to an ANPR camera. If you want to monitor cars going through and see if they have Euro rating or not, or what it is, we can do the whole thing integrated. Now, it's designed and made in the UK, in Newbury. We manufacture and test everything here, Garner Osborne Circuits in Hambridge Lane. They're our investor, our angel investor, and we intend to manufacture these in mass over there. And our model is going to be
And can I just, I need to make a declaration, and I know Mr. Osborne, so I didn't realize. So it's not pecuniary, it just used to be a neighbor.
Well noted, Chair.
Okay, so Mr. Garner basically said, oh, what are you doing? I think this is a great idea. I want to invest. We need this. So he's a typical angel investor. Now, our model is going to be to do a SaaS model. Instead of selling a product to somebody and then 2 years later, it's obsolete or it needs servicing and so on, we're going to do a SaaS model where we're going to supply the units, lease them to the people who want to use them. We'll maintain them.
Most people won't know what a SaaS model is.
Software as a service.
Yeah, exactly.
Software as a service. That means we provide the units that are leased by the end users, and we maintain and we change them, replace them, update them. If a unit goes bad, that's on us. We take it out, put another one back. The end user pays for the number of units that he's subscribing to, and he has all the visualization data included.
Okay, I just check that then. So that's solution as a service, not software as a service.
It's solution as a service,
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
Okay, sorry. So unfortunately, I haven't got a live web, so I can't show you the things, but you can see some of the maps there. I'm showing you. The picture you see in the top right-hand side, that was us going through central London and measuring something called VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Measuring VOCs is far more important than recording CO2 values. CO2 is a global problem. We can't do anything much about CO2. It's like being in a swimming pool and how much chlorine is there in the water. Some places might be higher than others. However, VOCs are a direct result of emissions from cars. They're all the really obnoxious cancer-causing chemicals. I have a list of them that I can send to you if you like. We measure VOCs, and that map you see there is showing all the VOCs going down Piccadilly Circus, and it is way, way above the maximum limits. The other map you see there is when we did a survey in Reading. So if you look at the next picture, the next slide, this is an example of a dashboard. BBC Radio Berkshire asked me, would you like to come and do a survey with us? Because there's terrible problems in the high street, in fact, in the high street near the cemetery where they're doing road works. And so I went with them and we successfully measured and showed that the levels of VOCs are very high. And there's an interview which I can share with you if you want on the radio. Very interestingly, the council officer said in the middle that when they were playing the radio back, his solution was to stop cars from coming into town. That was his solution for eliminating the pollution problem, which I thought was very interesting.
Do you have that officer's name?
I'll take the fifth on that one. And then I also decided to go and do a test. Does my system work anywhere in the world? It does. If you look the next slide, I went to Florida on holiday. I took my unit with me and stuck it to the rental car, and it worked perfectly the whole time we were there. We were able to take surveys. This is a device that you can put into an envelope, ship it in DHL to anywhere in the world, and you plug it into a cigarette lighter in the car and it works. It requires no installation, no local configuration. We manage the whole thing through our central system. Now, the next page, please. So the connectivity with APIs is important. The council might decide that you want to take a proactive scheme to shut certain streets or certain areas where the pollution levels are too high. We can set up triggers for you that do that, to go to either something that we make for you or something you want to buy from a third party that says no entry, £100 penalty if you come in here, but you can go in if you have an electric car. The imagination is incredible. The common sense thing allows us to bind this all together. So looking at the name, the next thing, so I already mentioned it to you. Next slide, please, number 8. It's a service as a solution. Basically, all these devices have a 2 to 3 year lifetime. The sensors that you purchase only have a 2 to 3 year lifetime. Now, we have everything already set up. We have remote upgradability of software. So the end user won't have to be worried about, is this unit up to date? We'll be continuously monitoring and taking care of that. So we've set up in Newbury a complete calibration lab to test these units. If you can show the next page, please. This is the lab. I'm just showing you, we've purchased calibrated gas that allows us to put the gas through the chambers and calibrate the units very accurately. And Garner Osborne is our partner there, and they've enabled this all to happen for us. So if you look at the next page, please, this gives you an idea of what we're aiming this to be. So we're going to have a Light, a Plus, a Pro unit, and this is the cost per year to run a unit per unit. So if you run one unit, if you wanted to put one unit at the Burger King roundabout, it'd be a shame because it can roam. But if you want to stick it over there, this is what it would cost you a year. The Pro version would cost you around £8,000 a year, and we would supply you all the visual data the way you want to see it. We can bespoke that for you. Ideally, if you really want to do something, convince some of the taxi companies to install these on them, ask them to participate in the trial and get them to willingly participate in making a measurement of our air quality. And then they could do this and we could run 10, 20 units and get a really good summary of the results. So if you look at the market potential, please, the next slide. Our goal is to make this into something really big that we can sell to somewhere huge. If you look at London, there are 7,800 buses in London at any one time, according to Siri. And if you put Envirosense on 25 of these, that would generate £20 million of revenue per year for our company. And if we did the same thing in other places in the UK, it could mean an additional 30 to 40 million pounds a year. This all means jobs. It all means manufacturing and taxes paid in West Berkshire. Now, we've now enabled this to roam worldwide. So we're in partnership with some big companies I'm going to tell you about in a second, but we've got 2 units going to Kuala Lumpur. We got an interested party there, and we've got other targets we've spoken to, Egypt and other places. These will all be manufactured here in Hambridge Lane and then shipped by DHL to there and managed and run from the employees over here, setting up and configuring them over here. We realize that when it becomes really big, we'll have to get involved with third-party partnerships. We're willing to do that. But the thrust is going to be to keep the manufacturing here. We don't need to move it to anywhere else. So looking at the next thing, next business partnerships, please. Next slide, please. So we're working with Kingston University, and they're going to help us develop an AI model where we're going to learn from the sensors how they're behaving and how they move. It's very difficult to measure absolute values. Even the high precision instruments that cost £10,000 each, they come with plus or minus 10%, and they're calibrated with gases that are plus or minus 10%. What's really important is when does it get worse and when does it get better? That's really the relative thing that you want to learn from this exercise. So Kingston University has agreed already to work, and they're funding it internally for their own, and we're jointly trying to apply for a Innovate UK grant to further work with them. Vodafone and Oracle, they've been absolutely superb. They've given us SIM cards, network access. There's been lots of help from them to help us get up and running. I get packs of 20 SIM cards sent to me, and I share with them the data on how well their network's doing. It's a brand new service, Cat M1, which we are the first people deploying Cat M1 in the UK on Vodafone. And then Honeywell is our main sensor partner. We have a joint development partnership with them, and they've given us every support we need. In fact, they've just written us a letter saying that we're way ahead of anybody else. So one other thing on the next page, I've got a flash update as of this morning today. Swift Logistics in Newbury has agreed to deploy up to 10 units on vans. And then one small taxi company has also agreed to put 3 units on local taxis as a test to see if it all works and how well it works. And that's how we're going to go. So I'm going to skip the rest of it because I think the rest of it is probably more interesting to have questions and answers more than anything else.
It is very interesting and great to see a local company doing something like this. It's on the agenda, Kofi, because you put it on the agenda. I don't know what do you want to speak to it a little bit there?
Yes, Bijan reached out to us soon after the new administration came into power because he's keen to talk to the council. And we asked him whether he would be happy to present, and he jumped at the opportunity. So grateful for your time, Bijan.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Bijan. I'm going to open it up to members first. Caroline, you were first to raise your hand. Can we come off presentation mode as well so I can see the hands on the screen as well? And then Martha.
All right. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for coming to do the presentation this evening. It's very interesting. Bearing in mind that the council are investigating a trial to close Northbrook Street. And one of the reasons is pollution. Another reason is to allow the hospitality trade to use the streets in the evening. Is this the kind of thing that maybe we could use to test out current level of pollution? I think we're waiting for the Department for Transport to get back to us before we can proceed. So maybe we could
I'm sure
measure
there are.
pollution now and then once the trial starts.
Yeah,
So-
and if those free devices that are being installed would be wonderful data to start receiving.
So I could,
I could, by the way, that is not something I can offer here at a meeting. But, you know, what Caroline is pointing at is something, the data from an exercise that would be of interest to the council, there's no doubt about it.
so I have a friend who's been investigating with 3 local shop owners in Newbury on the high street, and they are kind of warming to the idea of installing this. We just go upstairs, open a window, bend over, hopefully don't fall out, and then.
So do I
attach-
take it you are looking, part of the exercise of being here is to look for trial partners?
Okay,
or
so what, you know, really what would make this company happen is we've got to show that we've got some type of a funded pilot. We've got to show to people that we're a business and we've got income. Right now, we've been living off grants and self-funding. And I've got people, very big pocket people who've said to me, yeah, but has anyone actually paid you to deploy any of these?
Yeah, indeed.
And it's a question about, are you for real or not? This is a chicken and egg that is really important. Now, we are willing to be very flexible about what it is, but we need to show that we've got something and somebody said, yeah, I want to try it. I can assure you this is going to be shown in countries that you cannot imagine. I've got a huge venture capital company in the US who's interested in this, but they keep saying, when you're going to have something we can look at that's for real. And so these people are talking about 7-figure investments into the company that I'm so scared about. But I'm saying if we can have some way of showing that we've got a trial that we can demonstrate to other people, then we can deploy this from here. And I want to keep this in Newbury.
This isn't quite the purpose of
I understand.
EAG advice. What's interesting is the data you're able to collect and how you're able to collect it. I will talk with my colleagues, or certainly about,
Sure.
you know, what they might be able to do, or the council might be able to do to help a local business. And that's certainly something we'd be interested in doing as council. Always interested in helping local businesses, but we're controlled by our whole set of processes and so on
Sure.
to do that. So Martha, you had your hand up next.
Yes, I just think this is very timely because so much conversations about whether we're sort of reducing people's liberties by reducing the way they can drive and how much they can drive. I mean, we've got our own local example, but we've heard, you know, just recently about what went on in London and how people are objecting to 15-minute neighbourhoods, etc. And I think if you've got this concrete proof to people about what happens when you do reduce cars, and what interests me most, and in fact, I was thinking of possibly putting a question to the next Health and Wellbeing Board about what data have we got about pollution in Newbury now? Because I know we've had this stuff in the Berger cone, which must be way out of date. And we're hearing more and more about the dangers of pollution and people dying. You know, we've had cases of, you know, young children dying, but we know that, you know, a lot of deaths and a lot of severe illness is caused by pollution. And so it's not just about people reducing carbon. It's the sort of, well, that's part of it, but it's health and well-being. It's so many things. So I think we need this data and we need more information for people so that those who are skeptical and think they're just being controlled by these awful councils and these bodies out there begin to be part of the solution. So I think this is great. It's really interesting. Thank you.
May I make one comment?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I don't know if you saw, I don't agree with everything Sadiq Khan says, but on this one instance, I do agree. He said it's our right to breathe clean air. You wouldn't drink dirty water. Why would you accept to breathe dirty air? And I think he's right. And Newbury is not bad. I have to tell you, all the trials I've been doing around here, I can see much worse places. But this is a business that's going to set the standard for what's required. There's nothing like this out there on the market today that gives a complete end-to-end solution.
Okay. No, I say from a technology data collection perspective, no doubt that you're onto something. Roger.
Yes, if it's in order.
Normally,
Does your
but-
device, as well as measuring volatile organic compounds, does it measure NOx?
It measures NO2
NO2, okay.
SO2,
Oh, good.
ozone, CO, carbon dioxide,
Fairly comprehensive.
PM 2.5 and PM 10.
Okay.
All of those.
All right, so there's a whole bunch of trigger descriptions there that are important. So
And also, if I just may, temperature and humidity affect all of these readings, and therefore you need to understand on a dry day and hot, dry day, air is much more volatile and goes up, and it affects the readings. And on a cold, damp day, it's totally different. So if you want to put your hat on and say, we're going to look at these values and we're going to understand why it was so bad on that day in the high street, you've got to have the background set of information to be able to make a decision on that.
Okay, so I'm looking at the screen because I've not seen any hands go up, but for those people who end up watching this on YouTube, you do know this was going on YouTube, right? Or
No,
do you,
but why not?
well, this is the open part of EAG, not the closed part.
That's fine. I'm very happy.
Long as everything you've shared, you don't mind.
I'm very happy.
We don't have to kind of, well, anyway, the reason being is I know there's representatives from Hungerford Town Council or Hungerford Heat, sorry, that are watching or will watch. So you're reaching a wider audience than just what's people in this room. But before we move on, and thank you very much, Bijan, for what you've done so far. Is anybody online wish to add anything, ask any questions? Because we're about at the, well, we're already slightly over, I think. So no. No, that's, well, extremely important area working in. So thank you very much for presenting to us. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
So, okay, on that, I move on to any other business. Yeah, anybody want to throw a topic in for discussion? No. Okay, well, nobody's going to suggest we build a nuclear power station then, right? So, yes.
Well, just sort of very briefly, I just wondered whether, and well, this is appropriate for this group, but we've got an initiative out there being run by a small group called Draftbusters about reducing, you know, small initiative in people's homes to reduce their energy and for cost of living and all these things. And I believe that it's, it does need a bit of oomph. It needs a bit of publicity from Ken Neal as the originator of it. And he's just getting no referrals, he told me. So I'm wondering how much information is out there about this, what sounds like a very sensible.
Well, that's okay. Well, that's fine. Let's pop a 5-minute presentation.
I'm sure he'd be happy to.
From Ken
He's very
Neal.
voluble.
Did you say
so
Ken?
you'd have to be strict when asking for 5 minutes, but just to get the information out there and to maybe.
Yeah, we're not, I mean, we're letting the public see what's going on. But this is, remember, this is about talking to the portfolio holder, myself, and officers with things. Now, Draftbusters is on the radar already. It's not on the council's radar. So that sounds more like a comms exercise, which I think we could probably do outside of EAG. But if there's something new that he's innovating in the area that he'd like us to consider, then I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. Caroline, did I see you raise your hand?
Yeah, a couple of ideas, Chairman. We obviously have been doing tree planting as a council and also wildflowers. And we've got some extra budget for that. It might be nice at some point to get a bit of an update about that. I gave some feedback to officers yesterday. They've been doing great work around roundabouts, but I suggested it'd be nice to do some things in public spaces as well. Because obviously you don't want to just benefit from looking at the wildflowers by driving past them. You want to be able to go and look in a park.
And that's fair enough. I mean, that is one of the core things we need to do, but we need to find someone who can present to us on that subject area. So we all learn something from it rather than just repeating something that we've already done. So, or what we're doing. So is that acceptable? We'll try and find a relevant person.
Sounds
to
good.
to us.
And my second idea, in a lot of the rural villages, we are reliant on oil. But the government have brought in a new scheme called the Boiler Upgrade Scheme, and it follows on from a number of previous schemes where you could get cheaper air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, etc. It has come to my attention now that the price of air source heat pumps has dramatically reduced in comparison to buying a new oil boiler.
Is that
So
because
I
you just did it
wonder-
yourself, Caroline?
Sorry?
Is that just because you just did it yourself?
But it's quite interesting because I know in the past I've spoken to a lot of residents who said I can't, and it goes back to what Councillor Sumner said about cost of living. A lot of people have said before, I can't afford an air source heat pump. I'm going to get myself another oil boiler. Whereas now it's becoming a bit of a no-brainer that you can go for an air source heat pump because they are considerably cheaper than a new oil boiler. But I just wonder how many people are aware of that, and if there's some way we could discuss with officers to get somebody to do a presentation about
It sounds a little bit like a comms exercise, because if it's a slam dunk, then you'd hope people would be picking that up. But I actually am quite, I think I'm taking that, I'd be quite interested in understanding or seeing EAG presented with at what point does it become viable? Because it used to be that unless you had insulated your home properly first and done all these other steps, it just wasn't worth doing it.
Yeah.
You know, if the price point of heating and cooling that way has significantly improved, then maybe that's, I don't know if we can find someone there must be plenty of industry leaders that can come and talk to us. But I'm really interested in, if we're going to then take that and turn it into a piece of comms from the council, what's the crossover point? Let's make sure we're giving good advice out through the council, and we can debate that in the chamber as to what we think about what they say to us then.
Yeah.
Okay, so
thank you.
yeah, I obviously don't know when we can get these into the agenda, but I'm liking the collection of ideas to debate. Thank you. Anybody else or? No, on that basis, we've got Monday the 25th as the next meeting date, and that might get shifted based on the previous meeting. So please bear with us on that one, but approximately there. And the one after that is the 27th of November. We're moving to 6 of these a year, so slightly increased frequency from what before. I hope they're as productive as this one. I certainly learned a lot. I'd like to thank all the members, presenters, members of the public when you are watching, environmental groups that are watching. Anything you think is important questions, please give them to myself so that we can get them to feed them into the whole thinking process. But otherwise, thank you very much. Let's call it a night.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.